All right. Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us today for another FormAssembly webinar. Today, we are talking about how to transform higher education with better data collection. So you may know at FormAssembly, we work with a couple key verticals, and one of those is higher education. So we're hoping to deliver some key insights that will be helpful for you if you work in higher education. I'm joined today by two experts on our team, Natika and Jonathan, and they're going to provide you a lot of great information and great research that'll hopefully help you out at your higher education institutions. Natika and Jonathan, thanks for joining me. Do you guys want to give just a quick overview of who you are and what you do at FormAssembly? Natika, do you want to go first?
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Nitika, and I work as the account executive for higher ed in the sales team at FormAssembly. So if you have any questions about implementing FormAssembly at your organization, or if you would like a demo, please feel free to contact me directly.
And I'm Jonathan Payne, the higher ed subject matter expert at FormAssembly. I deal with anything to do with the expanding world of the higher education within the FormAssembly and linking that across to updates and developments from Salesforce and any trends that I can see going on.
Awesome. It's great to have both of you here. So before we jump into the meat of the presentation, I want to give a quick overview of what FormAssembly is for those of you who might not be very familiar with us. So FormAssembly, in essence, is an all-in-one web form building and data collection platform. So some of the highlights of our platform include an easy-to-use form builder, a robust integration to Salesforce, and high standards of security and compliance. So through using our platform, companies are able to save time, money, and effort in their day-to-day processes and get the most out of the data that they collect, whether they work in higher education or some other industry. So moving on to the presentation for today. So as I mentioned before, what we're talking about is how to solve common problems in higher education, specifically having to do with data collection. So it's just a fact that countless higher education institutions use inefficient methods for data collection, and that can cause problems for students and faculty. One way to combat this is to choose a better data collection platform that can help you solve problems and save valuable resources at your higher education institutions. And today, that's exactly what we're going to be talking about. Natika and Jonathan are going to dive into some of the common problems that higher education institutions face and talk about how to solve them. So without further ado, I am going to pass it over to Jonathan to tackle a few of these problems.
Okay, thank you very much, Maggie. Let's delve into problem number one, disconnected systems. So historic institutions that may have disconnected systems due to systems being set up 3 to 4 or 5 or even more years ago without any development or new technology. You might have paper forms for one process, multiple online form providers working alongside, countless spreadsheets to collect information coming at any angle about current students, potential candidates, alumni, and staff. University departments often have crossover, but I've seen many times before where the organizational structure of a university, admissions being in one corner, marketing being in another corner, it often leads to these departments being fragmented and each obtaining different systems at different times, different methods of data collection to satisfy the needs then. Whilst this can make sense, we've seen success bringing these fragmented systems of data collection to a unified, more central system. With different bits of data stored in different locations, it's a real struggle to join up this data about one person and provide the overall single customer view, which not only creates an admin nightmare, but also is detrimental to the student experience as a whole. Without a joined up single storage of data, it makes it harder to track the progress of the student through their life cycle. What forms have they filled in? What forms do they need to fill in? Do I need to contact someone in a different department to find out a bit of information? All this detective work can be time consuming and can take you away from your other work. It's also tricky with the new legislations around things like GDPR. If the request is made by the individual to delete their information from all records and to remove someone entirely from a system, you may need to bring in countless people to find where a single person sits and their information within the system. And that's something that Natika will touch on a little bit later. Now, how will we fix this problem? One data collection solution provides a single gateway to the data collected. The logins may be shared between different members of different departments, but the cohesive collection process helps streamline processes, but also saves costs by reducing the number of data collection products and tools you're buying and updating every year, not to mention the amount of licenses. Reducing the admin work between teams and systems, cross-referencing spreadsheets, the CRM, and lots of different data collection points is very time-consuming and therefore costly. You can also now be on top of the visual aspect and make sure that all your data collection points, for example, the online forms, look the same by providing joined-up view throughout the student process. Having all of the forms in one place means that you're able to manage the forms quicker and easier, and you can do so without having to track down the platform that it sits on, the owner of the form, etc. It helps troubleshoot when something goes wrong with the form, if that ever does happen. And one platform means consistency and training. There's only one platform to learn, and that means that we can speed up the creation of forms or any adjustments to forms. You can also control the access of who can see particular forms, which means that if there's any sensitive information for finance, for example, this can be segregated. The integration with other platforms such as Salesforce, MailChimp, or payment processors is key to incorporating collected data into where it needs to be used. For example, collecting an email address is likely to end up on a marketing email list and therefore needs to be automatically processed in MailChimp. A lot of universities are opting to use Salesforce as their CRM, which means a dynamic and strong integration with Salesforce is key. Having one data collection platform is useful in collecting all sorts of information throughout the student's journey, such as which program a prospective student is interested in, to who their next of kin is, to alumni donation capture forms. Building out this data collection really enhances the 360-degree view of the student within Salesforce. And let's hear it from one of our customers. So here's a quote from one of our customers. We can see that they're using the FormAssembly forms for things like course registration, job applications, admission processes, all sorts of different ways of being able to capture this information and use it in one place. On to problem 2, outdated technology. Do you have any staff manually entering data from paper forms into spreadsheets or other online tools? Perhaps sharing spreadsheets of student data across teams? Maybe you have to extract information from emails when a form is filled out. The technology that students and staff are using in their personal lives is consistently developing and changing. Students are expecting a more digital experience that is aligned to the way that they use technology every day. Universities are competing for content space with competitive brands and through platforms to give a taste of the university experience through social media. You might be driving away prospective students and reducing the student's experience with lengthy or disjointed form processes. One way of aligning the student experience with this through creating a cohesive data collection environment. So let's hear it from one of our customers. Over at the University of Florida School of Pharmacy, they noticed that they had older processes that were collecting data when they were actually seeing rises in rankings and the top quality students within the university, and they wanted to keep aligned with bringing the best possible classes that they can. So they saw an option to be able to develop their own technologies and their own form processes to align with that progression within the school. Now, how can we fix this problem? Students are expecting to view all of their information and communicate with their university through a single login rather than multiple areas. To make their lives and the lives of university staff easier through using FormAssembly, we've seen all sorts of forms such as admissions payments, event registration forms, extracurricular things like club and team registrations, modules and class signups, class review surveys, and so much more. One way we've seen success in this area is by using FormAssembly alongside the Salesforce Community Cloud, which means that the student has a single login to view all of their interactions, any forms that they need to fill in, anything to do with that university and their student journey. With a universal data collection platform, you can reduce unnecessary admin time for staff, but it's also the time that you can reduce for the individual, the student or prospective student as well. You can reduce time associated with form management, updates and new form creation. You can also use the forms for internal cases. We've seen them used for situations such as job applications, for HR updates, onboarding new team members, feedback surveys, professor and lecturer evaluation forms, and so much more. Once the forms are set up with the integrations to the appropriate synced platforms, you can essentially leave the connections to automatically get the student and staff data to where it needs to be, to those tools that you're using across the platforms and in real time. And I'd like to hand over to Natika for problem 3 and 4.
Thank you, Jonathan. That was a great overview of the two most common problems that we've seen higher ed institutions face. I'd like to talk about a couple more problems that we've commonly noticed. The problem number 3 for today is non-compliance. So is your higher ed institution struggling to comply? I know Jonathan talked a bit about how the landscape of technology is constantly changing and we need to keep up. But at the same time, the data privacy landscape all across the world and especially across different states in the US is also constantly changing. And staff at a lot of colleges and universities that we work with struggle to keep up with these ever-changing compliance standards with regulations like WCAG, FERPA, HIPAA, and GDPR coming along, among others. And non-compliance with these regulatory standards can lead to fines, loss of customer-student trust, and a lot of other negative consequences for the universities, which we definitely want to avoid. How we recommend that you can fix it is to make sure that staff is properly trained and up to date on all applicable compliance and security standards. What that allows you to do is when you are out looking for solutions for different parts of your business processes, let's say you're looking for a solution like FormAssembly, then this can be a qualification criteria at the university's end, where you can ask us right off the bat if we adhere with the security standards that your university needs to comply with, and then make sure that you're employing data collection platforms that are already compliant with these regulations that apply to your college or university, and then save everyone the hassle and the time that would otherwise be spent into making sure that the organization gets compliant in other ways. The next problem for today, and this is the last one, is ineffective forms. So one thing that as an organization you may want to ask yourself is, are the forms that you're using working against you? So are you struggling to process or keep track of endless paper forms? And at this point, I would like to ask, are you using paper forms at all? If you are, then that in itself, it indicates that you may not be staying up to date with technology already, and that definitely indicates an area of improvement. The next thing that you may want to ask yourself is if your online forms are optimized properly to encourage responses. Are your forms too long? Are your forms too overwhelming for people who are trying to fill them out? Are they relevant to them at all? Is every question that a form respondent filling out relevant to something that you need from them, or it's just a standard, or is it just a standard form that everyone needs to fill out, whether all questions may be relevant to them or not? If your forms may not be too relevant, if your forms are not optimized properly, then that again is another area of improvement. And then the last thing that you may want to ask yourself is, do you have to enter response data manually into your CRM? Once again, area of improvement. This would be a red flag because you have someone at your end who is spending time manually entering data, and you have several ways right now to completely automate that process and not have someone spend time to do that, and then focus time and energy on other administrative processes instead. How we recommend that you fix it is make sure you opt for an online form builder that cuts paper overload, and then it helps you keep data all in one place. You may also want to study web form practices for layout and design to create forms that your students will want to fill out, create forms that are relevant to them, exactly the pieces of information that you need from them, and that saves time for you and for them. It may sound a bit overwhelming, it may sound a bit of a work to study web form practices for layout and design, but I assure you it's all, when you actually start looking into it, you'll find that it's all a lot of common sense. And once you've looked at a few examples, you would find it very, very easy to build out forms and to envision the kind of forms that you want staff and students and faculty to fill out for you. And the last thing that we would recommend over here is to connect your web forms to Salesforce and other software that you may already be using in your organization. to save you time and hassle on manual data entry. Like I said before, it's completely unnecessary to have someone manually enter data into your CRM anymore. And you have solutions like FormAssembly at your disposal to help automate all of those processes for you. So why not use that? And this here is a review that Katie Bryan left for us on Salesforce App Exchange, which corroborates with almost everything that we've discussed over the course of this webinar today. I'll just read that out. Everyone on our team loves FormAssembly. We have multiple applications of forms that are quite long and detailed. Prior to FormAssembly, our staff were entering in applications by hand. Now the applications automatically look up, update, create records in Salesforce, saving so much time for our staff. We are continuing to find more areas of use to continue to automate processes and save staff time with data entry. So this kind of speaks for itself. So I'm just going to move on to the next slide, which is just a quick summary of what we've discussed today, which is how we can solve problems with better data collection. So by reforming your data collection processes, your college or university can save time, money, and hassle for students and staff. And we recommend that you choose a data collection platform that is versatile enough to solve multiple problems at once. And with this, we come to the end of our webinar today. I would hand this over to Maggie now for questions.
All right. Thank you, Nitika, and thank you, Jonathan, for all of that great information. I really hope that was helpful for everyone today. Now we're just going to jump into the question portion of the webinar. So if you haven't had a chance to throw a question into the question box, go ahead and do that, and we'll jump on those now.
Okay, thanks everyone for joining us for that. I don't see any questions at the moment, so we're just going to run through a few frequently asked questions that many people do have about FormAssembly and Salesforce. And then if you haven't had a chance, go ahead and throw your questions in. We have two great higher education and Salesforce and FormAssembly experts here, so they'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. But just to start us off here, I'm going to have a question here for Nitika, and I'd love it if you could just go over how the FormAssembly Salesforce integration works. It's one of our top connectors, and it's one that a lot of people use. So I'd love it if you could just kind of go over the basics of that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Maggie. So the way that the Salesforce integration with FormAssembly works is that FormAssembly is a Salesforce Gold ISV partner. And what we offer is a seamless Salesforce integration and we also have a high-rated App Exchange listing. And FormAssembly makes it very easy for you to create Salesforce Web2Lead, Web2Case, stay in touch kind of forms. And then there are a lot of more use cases that we work with. And we leverage the Salesforce API and our web form creation and processing technology to make it easy to create and update any record in Salesforce and Salesforce Marketing Cloud. And for more information, I would recommend that you check out our Salesforce and FormAssembly ebook that specifically focuses on this integration and will provide you a lot of additional detail, and you can find it on our website.
Awesome. Thank you, Nitika. Jonathan, I'm going to pose a question to you next. And we've just been talking about a lot of higher education use cases and data collection best practices, but I'd love if you could just talk about kind of the range of forms that you can create with FormAssembly.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can create any kind of custom web form. The options are virtually unlimited. You can build survey questionnaires with complex branching logic, multi-page data entry forms, client feedback forms, simple contact forms. So if it's something around kind of contacting a department or something within the organization. Online registration forms. We've seen a lot of extracurricular classes, things like surfing clubs or whatever for universities and higher education. So yeah, there's so many different forms, and I think something that's really great to see is when customers come to us with new ideas for forms as well, constantly evolving and expanding that side.
Yeah, that's a great point. We do see a lot of ingenuity and inventiveness from our customers. Nitika, I'm going to go back over to you. I think a lot of people do wonder how difficult it is to use FormAssembly and whether you need to know HTML or programming or whether you need to have very advanced technical skills in that area. And I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about that.
Okay. So the short answer is that it's not at all difficult to use FormAssembly at all. I personally have 2 degrees in humanities, and I've never coded in my entire life, and I've not used HTML, but I'm a very proficient user of FormAssembly. So that is just to say that our online form builder is designed to be easily accessible to anyone, regardless of your technical skill set. You can create and publish HTML web forms also without any coding knowledge. Yet you still have access to make changes to the CSS of the form. You can make changes to the HTML, and you can also add snippets of JavaScript if there are some very specific use cases that you have, and you have programmers to help you with that.
Awesome. Thanks, Natika. So we're just going to answer one more frequently asked question here, and then we will call it a day. If you have any other questions that you just think of after this webinar, always feel free to reach out to someone on our team and we'll help you get those answered. But to wrap us up here, I'm just going to ask Jonathan one more question here. And is there a limit to the length of the forms that you can create with FormAssembly, Jonathan? I know that a lot of higher education forms in particular can be very lengthy, and I think that's a common question that's good for people to know.
Yeah, absolutely. So there is technically a limit to the length of one particular form, but you probably will never reach it. Users have created forms that contain hundreds of fields without any problems. Also, FormAssembly allows you to create unlimited forms and collect unlimited responses. So yes, but it's very, very unlikely that the length will be reached.
Awesome. Thanks for clearing that up. And we are going to wrap up the webinar at this point. I don't see any more questions. So we are going to wrap things up. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Jonathan, Natika, thank you so much for being our resident experts here today. It was great having you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. All right. Well, keep an eye out for the recap of this webinar, which we'll be sending out to all of the attendees. And we hope to see you in another upcoming webinar. Thanks, everyone.